Is it going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
No, I thought I heard him say that. All right.
In August of 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified, giving women the right to vote. I'm going to inform you of the history of women in the workplace from 1920 to current. I'll be discussing their roles during each of the major eras and their projected role in the future. During the 1920s, whenever women were granted the right to vote, a lot of them viewed this as a form of independence. Many single women entered the workplace before marriage. Many married women didn't work because they were still expected to stay home and maintain the household and raise children. The jobs that they held were domestic, teachers, nurses. They worked in department stores that had just started to be more popular. The lower class of women worked in textile factories. During the 1930s and the Depression, the role of women in the workplace did not change that much. 1920 census showed that 24.3% of women were gainfully employed, while a 1940 census showed it was 25.4%, not showing a very marked difference. Jobs held in the 1930s were similar to that of the 1920s. They were domestic, teachers, nurses. Next, I'll discuss how World War II affected women in the workplace. During World War II, many of the men were sent overseas to fight, so women had to take a much more active role in the workplace. An article in History.com shows that between 1940 and 1945, the percentage of women that were gainfully employed rose from 27 to 37%, and 1 in 4 married women were actively employed. The role that these women played moved from being domestic and teachers to actually working in factories, skilled tradesmen, basically the jobs that the men had vacated whenever they were sent overseas. In addition, over 300,000 women joined the armed forces. And even though these women joined the armed forces and were doing the same jobs as the men, they were not awarded any military honors or benefits, showing that they were still not equal to their male counterparts. Next, we'll discuss the role of women between the 1950s and 1980s. During the 1950s and 60s, there was a new and expanding role of women in the workplace. Economy was much more successful, and the divorce rate was higher as women found that if they worked, they could support themselves and did not need the income of their husband. During the 1960s, there was a feminist movement where women were demanding more equality between their position and pay as their male counterparts. At this time, they also chose to continue their education to advance. This movement continued through the 1970s. During the 1980s, bachelor's degrees became more popular. More women went back to school to further themselves. They took on more management roles and also became more involved in politics. During this time, the pay gap started to close, though it was slower than the gap between responsibilities and ownership. Next, we'll discuss the current state of women in the workplace. Currently, more women own their own businesses. They're paid a higher position. A U.S. Census survey in 2007, business owners shows that the bachelor's degrees earned by men and women are about equal, though women tend to work less, showing that they're still staying home to raise a family, raise their children. It also shows that 35.9% of women own their own business. The areas that women are more active are health and education, and men tend to be more active in the mechanical and technical side. A study in labor force change shows that in 2050, the growth rate between men and women is the same. They're also going to be the growth rate is going to be steady over the areas that they work in, health and education for women, mechanical and technical for men. In conclusion, I've given you a brief overview of the history of women in the workplace between 1920 to current and what their projected role in the workplace is going to be. Whenever women were granted the right to vote in 1920, it opened up the door for them to start this movement where they strive to have equality with their male counterparts by continuing their education, demanding the same pay and positions. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.